Welcome to the Success Pick and Mix podcast. I'm your host, Nicky Raby, a professional pick and mixer. I'm a personal brand coach, a speaker, an actor, a creator, and a podcaster. I'm on a mission to help you find and create your version of success. Your pick and mix of life and business on your terms. A blend that complements your personality, your goals, and your circumstances. Since 2018, I've been sharing interviews and mini episodes to help you unlock your next step, to make it real and make it happen. Round here, we dream big. We go for the ideal version. We talk about money and make moves our future selves would be proud of. This podcast is free and available for you whenever you need it. So do rate, review, and subscribe for new episodes. If you want to go deeper with my support, check out my freebies house and unlock the rooms you choose. nickyraby.com/freebies house. I also have workshops, programs, and one-on-one bespoke offerings. For prices and availability, go to nickyraby.com. Thank you, as always, for spending some time with me and my guests. Now, on to today's episode. So, today's episode is slightly different. We have a return guest, which is very exciting. I spoke to Ingrid Fernandez about a year ago. I've been her coach and she's also become a friend. She's a legal consultant by trade and helps small businesses and freelancers really get their legal shizzle into gear and looking all great, basically. Ingrid reached out to me a month or so ago and sadly shared the news that her mum had passed away last year and asked me if I would be willing to have a conversation about grief and what that means and how you still run a business, run a life, perhaps take care of other members of your family, and generally keep going when you see on the internet there's all this striving for the dream life, but actually where you are right now in your real life is really difficult. So I just wanted to share that at the beginning of the episode with a little trigger warning that we do talk about grief in this episode. However, it's not sad, it's not depressing, it's very lovely and engaging, and hopefully you'll have some tips to take away with and practical things that you can do to move forward, but also that realization that you're not alone. And if you are going through a difficult time, or if you have lost somebody close to you recently and you're trying to do all of the things, but behind the scenes everything feels like it's falling apart a little bit, I'm sending you all my love, all my strength, and just to reassure you that you are not alone. I hope you enjoyed the episode and you get lots from it. Hi Ingrid, welcome back to the podcast. That's the first time I've said that.
Thank you, and I'm so thrilled to be back. It feels like, on the one hand, it feels like 1,000 years ago that we last talked on your podcast, and on the other hand, it feels like just a few hours ago that we talked. It's been
I know, you just pick up where you left off. I always feel like that with all my guests. Like, I feel like I've had a long haul flight with them, because there's that sort of, you just feel like you've been trusted with so much information, and it's a kind of, sometimes you have those conversations with people on a train, and then it's like, will we ever see each other again? And you're like, is this awkward? Probably. But yeah, I think it was about a year ago when, or maybe a little bit more, when we first had our chat, and you kindly reached out to me to talk about something that unfortunately, we didn't want to be talking about. But when you pitched me the idea, I really had such an expansive feeling out of it, actually, because it was something that I really do want to use my platform for. And I'm really in this transition at the moment with the podcast of being able to share dream life and motivational, inspirational content and all that kind of good stuff, but also that there's a real life going on underneath. And so do you want to just tell me
what's been happening in your world since we last spoke, I guess.
Yes, okay, absolutely. So you're right. It was about a year ago that we first chatted, and that was very soon after I started my business. And so I had a really exciting 6 months after we last talked, and I was throwing myself into my business and really loving it, and things were going really well. And then in about August of last year, we got a call. As I think I mentioned to you in the last podcast, my family lives back in Australia. So we got a call from Australia that my mum was quite unwell and had been admitted into hospital, but we didn't have any more information than that. And so we, when you hear something like that, you kind of throw everything in a suitcase. And so the next day we jumped on a flight to Australia, thinking we'd be gone a couple of weeks until mum was better and out of hospital. And when we got to Australia 2 days later, after 27 hours on a plane, we very sadly discovered that mum had been diagnosed with stage 4 liver cancer and only had a few weeks left with us. So obviously that was devastating and heartbreaking, and really, I think my life is a little bit of a before and after that. So from that, we cared for mum, and by we I mean my sister and I took care of my mum. And then at the end of October last year, sadly, she left us, and so we stayed in Australia for a few more months after that, just to really get our bearings again after what had been quite a surreal period. And then I also, because going through that, business really wasn't, I wasn't able to give myself to the business at all. So 6 months into the business, I had to really step back from it and put it on hold, put all my plans and ideas on hold, and just be there for my family. And so then it was about January this year that we came back to London, and we've kind of gotten back into the flow of London life and working again. And now here we are.
And also caring for your boys as well, who are,
yes.
need you and sort of expect life to carry on as normal. And even though the normal is completely new and confusing and overwhelming and emotional and all of those things, had she been ill up until that point, or was it completely out of the blue?
Well, she had had a different kind of cancer for about 9 years before last year. And so it would seem like we would almost be prepared for it, but she had a kind of cancer. It's called Paget's disease, and it's very rare, and it was very contained. So we were told, when she was first diagnosed in 2009, we were told that if you were going to get cancer, that was this sounds so surreal now, that's a great cancer to have, because it doesn't, generally speaking, it doesn't spread and it doesn't cause organs to shut down or anything like that. It's very particular to its location. So she managed that for 9 years with surgeries and things like that, which is not at all to say that that's easy. It wasn't at all. But there was never a terminal diagnosis with that. There was never, we were never concerned that it would have spread or that it was going to be something else. It was very contained. So when we got that diagnosis last year, it did come out of the blue in that she had just been through some treatment and was cancer-free earlier that year. So to then a couple of months later go for a checkup and to find out that things had progressed and changed so rapidly was mind-bending. It was completely unexpected.
Yeah, and whenever you have any kind of news like that, it is such an out-of-body experience, sort of having that shift of going, oh, it takes you almost like a couple of layers to absorb it fully. And I always think that when I've ever had to deliver news that has been really hard and I learned this from my mum because she used to work at the hospice, and that you have to deliver news in different layers. So you can't just say it like people do on EastEnders, because it almost would completely prompt the wrong reaction, because people just think you're joking or they didn't hear you properly or whatever it might be. So gosh, there's so much kind of care and consideration to have that. Since you've been back, what's really helped you to sort of be really kind to yourself, and also start to piece bits of your life back together?
Well, one of the biggest things for me is I am so lucky, and I'm grateful every day for the people that I have around me. So I have a very wonderful husband, and my husband's family are also amazing. I have a sister who is a godsend, and I think I very much couldn't have gotten through any of this without her. But also beyond that, and this is something we talked about briefly before, is the friends who were there who I didn't anticipate being such a pillar of support for me, who now I still reach out to and lean on, and who just are the wisest of people. So I've been blessed to have people who can prop me up when I haven't been able to do it on my own. So that has been one of the biggest lifesavers, I think, for me. And I think also because all of this happened in Australia, so being able to come back to London and have my husband and my children have our life here was a really positive thing. Not to say coming back wasn't hard, because it was very challenging, but also to get back into a rhythm where I felt more myself here. I felt, because this is, London is where I had my babies. It's where I started my business. It's very much Ingrid now. So it felt very comforting to come back into this life and to take baby steps into the world as it is now after my mum's left. So I think having that has been very comforting for me as well.
Yeah. And what has that looked like on a day-to-day basis? Have there been, because I guess the to-do list never stops, and when you run your own business, and you have children and you have responsibilities and things need to get paid and sorted, and life carries on, what's helped you to have those moments of kind of grounding for you, or those tools that you've sort of tapped into, I guess, when you were perhaps not necessarily feeling on top form, or today isn't the best day?
Yeah, definitely. And I'll be honest and say there have been so many days when I've gotten up and just felt the struggle of the grief. And I think that's one of my tools, has been to just take one day at a time. And this is my mantra every day, that I get up in the morning and I think about how am I feeling today in terms of missing mum, and in terms of coping with the feelings and just the heaviness that comes with grieving. And that's something I do for myself every morning before I start mumming and before I start working or whatever it is I am that day. I just take a few minutes and ask myself, how am I today? How much emotionally can I handle, and make an assessment on that. And that has been something really helpful for me that I started doing when I was in Australia. This is something I started because there are some days when I would wake up and think, actually, no, I can't do anything but the bare essentials today. And so I would get up and I would just make sure that I ate, and then I'd look after the boys and make sure they ate and stayed alive. And that was the day, just making it through the day and being okay with some days doing just the essentials to get through and be okay. And then other days I could get up and say, okay, today I can take on a little bit more, and today I can function, and just really giving myself the space to feel how I needed to. So some days that would involve crying a lot of the day, and it's difficult when people say, oh my goodness, what's happened, are you okay? And I'm like, oh no, this is okay, it's just a crying day.
Yeah, this is feeling really good actually.
Yeah, and just being okay with that. And I think that's something I've never really done before, going through this period where, not to say that I deny my feelings, but I always thought there's a time and place, where you touch base with how you feel and you let out emotions. But going through something like this made me realize that sometimes you just have to be how you feel and accept that for that day you're going to feel X and it will pass, and so that's okay. And so really having that gentleness and kindness with myself, I think that's something that I can give myself every day to try and get through.
And it just changes on a day-to-day basis, and sometimes a minute-by-minute moment. And I know when I've lost people in my life, sometimes it can be that cry, or that actually really being in the moment of remembering them, is really cathartic and good for the soul. And it sounds very bizarre, but I was really close to my granny, and there's this beautiful song that was at her funeral. And sometimes when I just need to get that big cry or that big sort of vat of emotion out, I play the song, and there's something about that, because I have a sense of control over it. So it's not like I'm just hearing the song in a shop, or I've never just heard it randomly. But we're not sort of taught how to grieve in that way. So it has to go in that very instinctive way, doesn't it?
Exactly. And that's something I'm so glad you mentioned, that we're not taught how to grieve. I think that is one of the biggest things after going through the last few months. And I'm not at all an expert on grief. I'm not saying that just because I've gone through it over the last few months, I'm suddenly an expert. I am not at all. But I don't think any of us are really given tools to deal with grief, or just given an idea of what to expect. And I'm very lucky in that I've not, prior to losing my mum, I hadn't had a big loss very close to me of any family members. So losing my mum was the first big loss that I had faced. And so I was completely unprepared for what grief would look like, and what a heavy burden it is to carry every day, and how it just changes, losing someone that close to you, how it really changes the world. I feel like the world looked differently after my mum left it, and I was the only one who saw that it was different. Everyone was functioning as normal, and these are things that no one just gives you a heads up to expect, how brutal that can be, and how big those feelings are, how overwhelming it can be. So I think that's definitely one of the challenges, just how huge it is, and how ill-equipped we are to deal with it.
And it doesn't matter that another Monday has rolled along, and I think this is important to say about change as well, that, if we tell ourselves on one Sunday that, well, that's the end of the week, but tomorrow's going to be a new week and I'm going to feel positive and great and all the rest of it, that in that instance, grief is not the way that it shows up, because grief will pop up to say hello as and when it feels like it, and in a way that you're not necessarily expecting. And another thing on funerals and grieving is that we're not taught about the logistics. Everything is so hush-hush. We're not told what to expect. And I remember, I think I didn't go to a funeral until I was about 25, and my dad was there, and it was his dad, and my dad sort of pulled me to one side and said, "Do you know what's going to happen? Do you know, do you know?" And I felt so sort of young and naive at the time, and I said, "Well, sort of not really." And he walked me through and talked me through the sort of the order of service, like you would at a wedding or any other kind of celebration. And I was so grateful that he kind of was so in tune with me in that moment, that and took that time, because it suddenly became less scary and much more manageable. That if there's that sense when everything is all a bit out of sorts, then you can have that moment of, okay, this is what's going to happen, or this is when it's going to end. Like, once this has been the case, it's probably only going to be 5 more minutes. Phew, then we can, get back and talk to somebody, or stand up, or move, or I would love to know sort of how you feel about life now, and what changes or what prompts it's caused you to make in your own life, or maybe it hasn't changed anything?
Well, to be honest, it's changed a lot. A lot. In terms of the relationships in my life, it has really clarified for me how important they are, how, just to love hard on the people that love you, because they're just, they're so important to who we are. And so it has made me, I used to think that I was quite a grateful person and I would do my gratitudes and things like that. But I think now, having lent so hard on the people around me and they all just carried me, I feel immensely grateful for the people in my life in a way that I haven't been before. Another way things have changed is that before, and especially because I had just started a business, I was very in it a lot, and I didn't at all have boundaries between work and life. I just would work all the time and be on my phone a lot and checking emails and on social media a lot. And I'm not at all saying that's a bad thing. That's, I think, common to small business owners, and that's, especially when you're starting a business, that's probably quite normal. But after having a break, and also having a break from it and coming back to it and finding that the community I had built around my business was still there for me, and the people who cared about me from a business perspective. So there were other small business owners, not just clients, but just other people in the community. They cared about me. So when I came back, they were still there.
Yeah.
And I think that comfort of, yes, life will happen, and yes, we will go through times where we're not able to be as present as we would like to be, but that doesn't mean that all the hard work we've done goes away. And especially when we think about things like Instagram algorithms, and, if you're not posting frequently enough, then people aren't going to see it, and so on. And going through this period where I really wasn't posting anything anywhere at all, I really just vanished from social media for a little while. And when I came back to it, the community was still there, and they were still engaging with me, and we were still having chats on Instagram. And so I think we can, and so as a result, one of the changes now is that I really switch off from my business. And there are some days during the week when I have my 2 young children with me all day, and on those days I turn off all my notifications, and I'm just mum for those hours, which is not something I could really do before. I would bounce between them and working, and I'm so much more aware of where I am. So on the days when I have hours to work and I don't have the children, I can really be present and throw myself into my work. And then the times when I'm mumming, I can throw myself into that. And then the times in between, I can just take out pockets of time for myself, which I wasn't doing at all this time a year ago. It wouldn't have occurred to me to do that. So
isn't that funny that I'm exactly the same. It's such a basic thing of, even the good food and the sleep, or actually going to bed when you're tired, not just pushing on regardless. And I think back to kind of early days of being a mum, that sometimes I don't know if it's a female thing, or I don't know what it is, but I sort of made do with myself, and it's something I have to really watch, because sometimes there's that thing of, oh, it's okay, I don't mind, whereas when there's something going on that is actually huge, for the first time and I'm doing kind of quotations here, we have to become selfish, because there's no other way, there's no other solution in that moment.
Yeah, that's it. And I think there's just so much, and look, I'm very lucky to be able to take, these pockets of time, and I know that there are a lot of people who can't do that, but I think it gets so easy to forget the little things that we need. We forget when we're so busy running our business and being parents and being partners and wearing all the hats, we forget about, the me that likes to sit and read a book for an hour, or the me that just
quietly with no friends.
That's it, yeah. Or that likes to drink my coffee hot on my own, or go for a walk. Just these little things that we just, that don't involve social media and don't involve posting a picture, or checking in anywhere, just doing these little alone things just to get that space back in our heads and to have no one. If you're a parent of a young child, you appreciate having no one on you for a little while.
I can move my arms. I don't have cramps anywhere in my body. How nice.
Yeah, and there's, you can wear clothes that don't have food or bodily fluids on them. So there are all these.
And they're not even your own usually. They're somebody else's.
That's it, yeah. So I think these little things we get so caught up in doing all the really important things that are still very important, but we forget about the important us things that really, just to quieten the noise in our lives a little bit. I think that's so important.
And doing stuff for you that is going to work the internal you, not the external you, is so key. Like the amount of... I was in Victoria the other day and there's a very sort of Instagrammable cafe out there and there were just people sort of posing and it was almost like, it felt really brutal. It's like they'd rocked up, they were wearing a great outfit, get the shot, get the cake, get out. Like there was there was almost like no connection or no enjoying the moment, really, that it was, that the moment was so artificial. I mean, maybe they were enjoying the moment, but it was almost like a tick rather than it actually enjoying the experience and seeing what was around them.
Absolutely. And I think our lives get a little bit like that when we're doing all the things, and with to-do lists, you're just ticking things off because you have to, things have to get done and life has to keep going. And we just forget to do the things that aren't on a list and the things that aren't for someone else. We forget that there are really important things to do that we don't, need to post online. You're right, it's about the internal things as well that just tend to fall by the wayside a lot of the time.
Yeah. How have you found the transition into asking for help? Because I'm sure there's been a few times over the last months where you've maybe asked for somebody to do something which in normal life you would have just completely done by yourself without thinking about it. But how has that transition been for you in sort of stepping back and allowing people to take care of you as well?
That is such a good question. I think asking for help is something I was almost allergic to a year ago. It wouldn't sit well with me. I was so afraid that people would think I'm taking advantage. Yes. I was so afraid people would think
I'm not saying that you would be, but I'm with you every step of the way.
Yeah, and also there was so much of a need to be on top of everything and to have everything turning as it should, that I didn't need help, and that was within me. It wasn't an external expectation. It was that I felt I needed to do all the things because then I'm doing all the things that I'm supposed to do and I'm not failing at anything. So I would not ask for help at all, and I took on way too much. And going through the last 6 months, I had to lean on people for everything, to be honest. I had, my husband had to take on the majority of the parenting while I was caring for my mum, and my parents-in-law, so my husband's parents, had to help massively with looking after our 2 little boys. And because we were in a different country, we were staying in my husband's parents' home, we had to live in their house. We took over their home because, that was just what needed to happen at the time. And they were caring for the boys and they were taking care of their meals and doing all the things that I usually do all day, every day. And I had to just let go of that. I had to let go of being the kind of parent that I was used to being.
And how did you do that practically?
So my husband stepped in because I was caring with my sister. We were sharing care of my mum. So I was with my mum a lot of the time. And I'm lucky in that they only lived about 10 minutes apart, so I could bounce back and forth. But, I had to say quite openly to my husband that I need to be my mum. I need to be a mum for my mum for a little while, and I need you to be mum and dad to the boys for a little while because I can't mum both as much as I would like to. So
And actually saying the words, my goodness, because especially in those times, we sometimes feel like people know what we think that people know what we mean, but unless we actually say it starkly, then it's only then when they go, oh, okay, I know exactly what I now need to do to support you.
Yeah, that's it. And I think there was also something for me, there was something a little bit freeing in being able to say, this is what I need to do now, and how can we make that happen? Because there was no way, this was something we'd never navigated before, either individually or as a couple. We'd never been through a scenario like this. So I couldn't expect David, my husband, to know what I needed, because I didn't know. I didn't know what it was going to look like, and he didn't know what it was going to look like, and our poor toddlers didn't know what it was going to look like. So it was very much, I had to really be okay with saying, I can't do all of these things, and so we need to kind of share that load, and how can we do this, and what can you take on so that I can let go? And it was really to get to that point of saying it was difficult, but once I put it out there, we could do all of that together, and it was so freeing to not have to wear all of that responsibility myself.
And that is just such a new layer to your relationship that you will take with you going forward, and that there will, it's so interesting the way that relationships change over the years, of especially if you've been with somebody for a long time. When you face challenges together, you have to pull together as a team, however much you want to blame the other person, or you're tired, or if that person is one of the people who is closest to you, you want to lash out at them, maybe not physically, but, emotionally, and sort of they get to see the worst of you. Whereas, gosh, if you can take a deep breath and become a team, it just makes everything so much easier, and then you have the energy that you need to focus on the things that you need to.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think when you go through these difficult times, and they look so different for everyone, but when you go through something like this, it's so easy to almost forget the humanity of the person that you're, who's there for you. So for me, it was my husband, and, to forget that they're also standing with you in this really difficult situation. So they've got all the feelings, and they've got, so for my husband, who has known my mum for 16 years, for him, it was an enormous loss, and it was an enormous grieving period. And I think to remember that we're all just going through something, whatever it may be, it's not going to be identical, and the feelings might look differently. How we deal with them is going to be different, but we're all going through something at some point. And if we can remember that before we react, I think that's something else I learned to do during this period, because almost everyone I was coming in contact with was also grieving in a different way, and it was totally a different situation for them, but that didn't make it any less painful. We were all losing someone that we loved so dearly, and who, really impacted our lives. So everyone I was dealing with was in pain. And so I think if we can just keep in mind when we're dealing with people in our lives, in the people close to us, that we're all carrying something with us, I think that is a kindness that you can give to them. And it also eases it for yourself. If you're in a painful place and you're able to be kind to someone else because of their pain, then everyone's just being that little bit kinder, which I think we all need when we're going through something.
Completely. And saying things out loud is so key. And sometimes we can bury our head in the sand and think that we're the only person that's ever been through there. But I guarantee there'll be a book, there'll be a podcast, there'll be a YouTube clip or a blog. And, if you can be brave and sort of delve into those, and you think that it's going to help you, gosh, it's so much easier. And like we were saying earlier, when you have motherhood in the early few years, sharing that with another mum, of not feeling like you have to be the polished sort of like, hi, I'm here, I'm doing it, we're here at the playgroup, we're so excited, we haven't slept for a fortnight. Like, just even having a normal conversation that's not competitive, that's not, oh, my baby's sleeping through the night. It's so refreshing. And I think certainly we're all just craving much more of that. And so if you can start that conversation with somebody, gosh, it could be really life-changing and game-changing for them.
I think so. And I think, like you say, in new parenthood, there is so much change. It's similar when you're grieving. There is so much change for the person who's going through that. And I think it's for any kind of trauma. So if someone's going through a divorce or a relationship ending or a business ending, there are so many different forms that grief will take, and so many different scenarios where someone's going through a loss. And I'm not saying that, you know, they're all the same and we're all in the same kind of pain. It's nothing like that. But if we can, you know, be open to what the other person's going through, and rather, like you say, rather than trying to be the strong one, trying to always power through, I think if we can just be that little bit more vulnerable about the hard things, that also gives us a chance to support other people and be there for each other, which, you know, it's what we all ultimately need, I think, just that understanding when we deal with other people.
You're so right. And bizarrely, funerals are such hard experiences. And I think always that moment from the death to the funeral of like waiting. And the days just seem so long and you just feel like you're never going to get there. Once the ceremony or the service or the sort of formal bit of it has been completed, bizarrely you end up having the most interesting, deep and meaningful conversations with people, and like chatting to old friends. And I remember going to my granddad's funeral, and like I met all his friends that I'd never met before because he lived a long way away, but like I knew them all because he'd spoken about them. And that was so, yeah, there was something lovely full circle about that, and understanding them in a different context as well.
Yeah, we were really lucky. That's something actually my sister and I were talking about after my mum's funeral, when we were at the wake, and we had so many of her friends who we didn't know personally but who we knew of would come up to the both of us, and they were so kind and said they'd heard things about us from Mum, and they almost knew us the same way we knew of them, and could they have a hug because they felt like they knew us. And it was so beautiful to see. Obviously, Mum impacted all of us as a mum. She, you know, that's who she was for us, and obviously the biggest role in our lives. But all these people who loved her so much as a friend or as someone like a sister to them, and there was so much positivity, and so many people were saying the same beautiful things about her. You know, the impact that she had on people was so consistent, you know, and there was so much comfort for us in that all these people would remember her in such beautiful ways. It really meant a lot, because you kind of think outside of yourself. There's the way that we will remember her, but there's also all these other people who will be thinking about her and take her forward, which is lovely.
Oh, it's so lovely. And it is that sense of, I think sometimes, especially in the UK, where we're taught not to say anything, or we don't want to get it wrong about death. So we end up kind of not mentioning it at all. And we have to do better to even just saying, gosh, I'm so sorry to hear your news. That's enough sometimes, but you have to acknowledge it. Another lady who has been on the podcast, she lost her husband a couple of years ago when he was, I think, 32. So such a young guy. And she was just, I mean, she's very sort of upfront in the way that she says it. She's like, it's just weird if people don't mention it and kind of brush over it. It's just really odd. It's the elephant in the room.
It absolutely is. And it's funny because it's almost more awkward for the person who's lost someone, because it's not like we're never not thinking about it. You know, when I talk to friends and they say, oh, I don't want to bring up your mum, you know, and remind you of it. And I think, well, when do you think I've forgotten about it? Yes. You know, and I don't mean that in a mean way, but it's just, that's a new part of my life now that's always going to be with me. And there's like you say, what I found over this period is so many people who have wanted to show they love me and they loved her and they want to say something and they don't know what to say. So I've got messages that just say, I love you, I'm so sorry. And for me, that's enough, because
perfect. Yeah.
It's just that they want to be there in whatever way they can. And also, a lot of people have said this to me, I don't know what to say to make it better. And again, I don't mean this to sound mean, but there's nothing you can say that will make this better. There's nothing anyone can say that could make grief better. But saying something like, I love you, or I loved her, or I'm here for you, or do you want to go for a walk, or a champagne, or a coffee, or, just, I think, like you say, saying something and just reaching out to people is enough. There's no right thing to do or say. And I've not had anyone in this period who's said something and I thought, wow, I wish they didn't get in touch. There's never been something that has hit me the wrong way, because I know that they're just wanting to care for me and also show how much they cared for Mum. So I think definitely when someone's going through any kind of grief, there's no harm in just saying, I love you, I'm sorry, do you want to talk about it? And the worst that they can say is no, thanks. And then you're done. It's acknowledged and you moved on to the next thing.
Yeah. And people sometimes don't go, gosh, well, what if they invite me round for a fortnight and we have to sit and talk about it, and I'm not going to, for the most part, people are not going to do that. But a walk is fine, because actually being heavy in grief, it's really exhausting as well.
It is. It's so tiring. And I think it impacts people's health. It impacts massively on people's mental health. And again, because we don't talk about it enough, we don't know to expect these things. We don't, it'll change how you feel at work. If you even want to go to work, it'll change how you feel about parenting. It'll change how you feel as a wife, as in every aspect of your life. It'll change things. And it is exhausting. It is heavy. It's a heavy thing to carry around. So, just doing the little things, being there for someone in little ways, giving them little pockets of normalcy is a really big comfort.
Yeah. Yes. Gosh, I'm so appreciative that you shared this today, because I know we're going to get a lot of messages from this episode. And if you're listening as well and you're going through something similar, I hope you get some comfort from this. And I guess when we were talking about what we wanted to achieve from this episode, or our intention, I think the overarching thing is we don't want people to feel alone, that everybody is going through stuff. And even if you don't know us personally, then please know that we're extending our love and strength and all that good stuff out there as well. But thank you so much, Ingrid. Is there any other final words that you want to share before we come to a close?
I just want to say, just to touch on what you said and take it a little bit further, in that if you're going through something like this, and it doesn't matter what the trauma is, but if you're in a place of grief, I think the hardest part for me, again, I can't speak for everyone, is the loneliness and feeling like no one knows what it's like. And while that's true, because no one's lost that exact same person the way you have, or that relationship or whatever it may be, we're never actually alone. And there are so many people and so many ways to find support and to find someone who will understand. So just know that no one's walking this journey alone, I think, would be lovely for people to take away.
So nice. And if you don't find the person that you need professionally, if it's a counsellor or a therapist or whatever, just keep looking, because that match will be out there as well. Thank you. Oh, I wish I could just give you a big hug, Ingrid, and just thank you so much for sharing today. I know it's going to be one that will be treasured and no doubt revisited as well. So thank you so much.
Oh, thank you for giving me the opportunity to have this conversation, because it really means a lot to me, and to do it with someone I trust and who's made it so much easier than I anticipated is something special.
Well, it's my pleasure. It's my pleasure. And I will be taking you for a glass of champagne very soon. Once I have this baby, I'll be like drinking all the champagne. There's nothing worse than a heavily pregnant lady hovering around a bar. But there we go. But anyway, I'm sending you lots of love. Thank you so, so much.
Thank you. It was great talking to you.
Thanks so much for listening to today's episode. If you haven't already, feel free to rate, review and subscribe for all the brand new episodes. If you want to go deeper with my support, check out my freebies house and unlock the rooms you choose. nickyraby.com/freebies house. I also have workshops, programs and one-on-one bespoke offerings. For prices, availability or just to have a chat with me, go to nickyraby.com. Thank you, as always, for spending some time with me and my guests, and I'll see you next time.